Hello, I'm Henry Emmons, and welcome back to Joy Lab.
And I'm Aimee Prasek. So we are in our grief series. We're leaning on the 5 gates of grief from the work of Francis Weller with additional gates from other practitioners. And today we are exploring the 6th gate, which is grief for harm done. So this gate was added to Weller's framework, or at least popularized, by Sophy and Azul Thomé. And in this gate, we're talking about the grief of being the one who caused pain. Pain and harms that we've caused to ourselves and to others, probably things we regret, and that causes grief. So it can include the decisions, actions, even patterns of thought like corrosive negative self-talk or an overwhelming negative self-focus that have caused harm to ourselves. It could include the choices that we've made that just felt necessary, things we did because we felt like we had no other option, but that harmed ourselves or someone else. And it includes inaction, the times when we maybe didn't intervene when we could have, and it includes collective harms we're part of, like benefiting from things like racism or classism, ableism, environmental destruction. So this includes so much. I could continue, but I think you get the gist of it. And this gate asks us to look honestly at the ways we've caused or participated in harm, which takes a lot of courage and a lot of wisdom and a lot of practice. And just a disclaimer before we do that, before we get into it, this gate also requires us to not soak in these harms, to over-marinate, like we've talked about in past episodes. But we need to see them so that we can grieve them and learn from them, and so that we can really stop cycles of harms as well to ourselves and others.
Yeah, I just really want to emphasize that, Aimee, just what you just said, that the idea is not to soak in these harms. I think that's a often misunderstood approach to grief. I think it happens a lot where we get stuck in it. It's almost as if grief itself can become a way of life, in a sense.
Yeah.
But the way I understand it, anyway, grief is meant to flow right through us. It's not supposed to become like a stagnant pool. So grieving well means that we release whatever we're grieving. Doesn't have to be immediately, but that idea is to work towards that. But before we can release anything, we have to see that it's there. We have to tell the truth. I think this can be a really challenging gate for a few reasons that I can think of. One, if you really think about it, the ways in which we participate in harm are numberless. This gate is immense. It's almost infinite. So let's acknowledge that, but not shy away from it just because it's so big. Second, I think for some folks, it's a very short step from feeling badly about causing harm to getting really caught by shame and guilt. And we want to be very clear. This is not about wallowing in guilt. This is about releasing the hold that these things have on us, knowing that for the most part, this is all happening unconsciously. There are exceptions, I'm sure, but very few of us cause harm to others on purpose. It's largely unintentional, but it does happen. And because it happens, it creates this kind of unconscious burden on our psyches. So let's just see if there are ways we can lighten that burden a bit. And then third, to some, I realize this might sound kind of woke. And so that can raise a little defensiveness. And I get that, really. But if you notice that feeling of maybe irritation or defensiveness, just let it go. Try to touch it lightly and let it go. Because we're not looking at this as something we should do. It's really just trying to give our attention to this because it's a good thing to do, not because we're trying to blame ourselves or seek atonement, but because we are all looking for inner freedom. And genuine inner freedom does require an honest look at ourselves and how we affect those around us.
Yeah. Yeah, this is about inner freedom. I think that's important. So I like also, Henry, you're noting this word of releasing. It's so different than just getting over something, which I think we'll get into more today. Releasing feels a lot better because I can get over something and still just stuff it down and be
still hold on to
it. Which maybe I haven't really gotten over it, but yeah, I don't know. You can just jump over something and ignore it. But
I'm over it.
But you get out of my face, I'm over it. Yeah. Yeah. Releasing that's what we're looking for. I think that's beautiful. And we can't do that when we're closed up or unconscious to this stuff. It will bury us. Yeah. We can't release it if we can't see it. And to note about guilt, I love this wisdom from Sabaa Tahir. She writes that there are two kinds of guilt: the kind that drowns you until you're useless, and the kind that fires your soul to purpose.
I like that. Yeah.
Right? So that's what working with our grief can do. I think it can strangely help us to get out of guilt, even when it feels worse than the guilt for a bit of time. And I think I also want to bring up something called moral injury. I think it relates here, how important it is for us to kind of accept these harms so that we can be free of the wounds and the symptoms that result from this unnoticed and untended grief. And then we can rise up with, something more, rise out of it with something more. So moral injury is when we betray our own values or see others do it. And it's the psychological wound that really comes from that. And so when we violate our morals, then the wound isn't just guilt or shame. It's a shattering of meaning, like a loss of trust in yourself, or if you witness these harms, and a loss of trust in others or in the world. And research has found that moral injury is actually more strongly associated with PTSD symptoms than direct exposure to danger or to that harm. And so this doesn't have to happen in war. It can happen anywhere. When healthcare was rationed during COVID, when someone chucks their empty fast food containers out of the car window, when someone is denied life-saving care by an insurance company, when kids are detained, when people do not pick up their dog poop in public places. I could go on. And some are big things, yes. Some are littler. But they both can cause a wound, or pick at one, like the dog poop thing, I'll just say for a moment. Or someone cutting you off from traffic. Maybe that's a more relatable one. And you just lose it, right? Untended grief in this gate can mean that you just snap at the littlest things because that little thing reminds you of the bigger harm, that bigger moral injury or wound, and its associated grief that you haven't tended to. So this gate speaks to that. It's not just a harm that we witness or commit. It's the betrayal of our human values or morals that is so destructive. So this is complicated.
Yes, it is complicated. But I also think this is quite profound. I really like how you said it, Aimee, describing it as a moral injury. Even if we feel we have little choice in what we do, it still hurts us to go against our own deeply held principles. So I'm really glad we're talking about this. To me, this feels like it's deeply embedded. It's like a deep wound that we don't even necessarily know is there. And I believe that grief can help us heal these wounds. And even more than that, I think it can help us see what we are doing so that maybe we can stop causing as much harm in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what grief wants us to do, I think. So let's dig into this more with how this grief shows up when we harm others, words we've said, actions we've taken, ways we've we've hurt others. Let's focus there first. So most of us can think of the many times we've lied or betrayed someone or were cruel. That can probably pop into your mind pretty easily. These harms can haunt us, absolutely, years or decades. And there's a reason why they stick with us. As social creatures, we're wired to repair harms when they happen, to maintain or strengthen our social bonds. And when we don't take any action, I think that's when these kinds of buried harms can turn into deep guilt or shame, and they can accumulate. And shame just pushes us into isolation, as we've talked about in this series. Grief, on the other hand, invites us into community. So I think that's really important here. When harm has been done, grief is calling us to reconnect and repair the best that we can.
Okay, so I'm going to take a leap here. Stick with me for a minute, because this reminds me of an autoimmune disease where, with autoimmune diseases, the harm is not caused by something from outside the body. It's the body's overreaction to something where it starts attacking or harming itself, okay? So the immune system's job is to try to protect us. It just overdoes it. And it's that overreaction that causes inflammation, pain. It might even destroy tissue that's otherwise healthy. And I think shame is the emotional equivalent of an autoimmune disease. So a little bit of guilt, I forget how that was framed in the quote you just said. What was the term for it?
Yeah, two kinds of guilt. The kind that drowns you until you're useless, and the kind that fires your soul to purpose.
Okay. So the firing your soul kind might be really good for us. The other kind, not so good. It really is harmful to us, and it can send us off into this spiral that the strong overreaction in itself becomes what causes the harm.
Absolutely, an overreaction. I like that because it reminds me too that we're noticing the harm, we're seeing it, right? We're feeling it clearly, but we've just gone too far down the path. It's like the course correction that is already given to us, like a car navigation telling us to take a U-turn almost. I'm switching the metaphor now, but I'm just going with it. Like head back because you missed the turn, but you were going there. It's okay to touch it, like you said. So I love that. I think that's a really helpful example. We also touched on collective harm just a bit already. We got into some of that with earlier gates as well. So I want to also now touch on to the harms that we cause ourselves. So there are lots of examples here. The way we talk to ourselves, lifestyle choices, addictions, and whether they're unconscious or even caused by disease, none of that really matters here. I think that's what's kind of interesting about this as well. The point is that the harm has happened or is happening, and we deserve some healing from that. And the tricky thing here is that in this case, we are the perpetrator and the victim of the harm. And that's hard. It's hard to recognize both of those roles in a kind of rational way. And we are not rational creatures anyway. So it's just like another burden. That's my perspective anyway. It's not a bad thing necessarily. But that's the power of working with grief. I think it can open us up rather than close us down. Mm-hmm. And it can hold with compassion your hurt and pain that you experienced, and compassion for causing that pain. And I think this is also a lot like post-traumatic growth. We've talked about that as well here at Joy Lab. Post-traumatic growth, unfortunately, is not about psychological comfort. It's about a kind of awakening, a kind of firing of the soul to purpose as well. But this awakening through something hard. So it's not easy. And that's kind of the point. I don't believe in a no pain, no gain as like a way of life. But when it comes to grief, pain and gain are kind of the two main locations on the map. And like grief is the ride between them. There's just no escaping it.
Well, I think you nailed it when you said that really grief is about opening up. And I think that's really the key, is to keep doing things that open us up.
Yes.
So let's talk a minute about equanimity, because I think that's really relevant to this discussion. I think of equanimity as balance. And when your mind has equanimity, then you can hold two things at once that might seem completely opposed to one another. So you can fully acknowledge the harm you've caused and at the same time hold yourself with compassion.
Yeah.
Remember, this is not about blame and shame or concluding you're a bad person, not at all. So back to the immune system analogy for a minute. I think of grief like retraining the immune system to get back into balance, to have equanimity, to be able to respond to threats, but not with that harmful overreaction, just a normal response that takes care of the problem, but does not leave pain or damage in the process. So here you have to hold yourself with compassion without minimizing the impact of your actions, because both things are true. Yes, you caused harm, and yes, you are worthy of compassion.
Yeah, both things are true. That reminds me of Sister Helen Prejean's wisdom. She wrote Dead Man Walking. She would say, people are more than the worst thing they've done. I love that. Same for us. You are more than the worst thing you've done. All of us are. And I think the empowering goal of working with this gate is to be a person, as you said, Henry, who creates less harm. A person who creates less harm. Not no harm, but less harm. No harm is impossible. It just is, which means none of us are purely good or purely bad, which again means that you are more than the worst thing you've done. And when we shift into that, like really believe it, it fosters humility and compassion and healing. Because if you can acknowledge your own capacity for harm, you can extend more grace to others. And that creates a cycle of healing rather than harm. And that's huge. So next week, we're going to enter our seventh gate, the gate of trauma. And we'll talk about how grief and trauma intersect and how through that we can create more healing. So to close our time today, I want to share some wisdom from Maya Angelou. She wrote, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better."
Thank you for listening to the Joy Lab podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, visit joylab.coach to learn more about the full Joy Lab program. Be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Please remember that this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice and is not a replacement for advice and treatment from a medical professional. Please consult your doctor or other qualified health professional before beginning any diet change, supplement, or lifestyle program. Please see our terms for more information.